It is rankings and ratings season here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome to our third edition of Oklahoma Sooners Live. Come your way every Friday, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 there in Norman. Jason Ray, of course, joining us from Last Word on College Football to make it all happen. Jason, how you doing today?
Good, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Memorial Day weekend is coming up in a weekend from now, and for a lot of people, that's kind of the unofficial start to summer. And at least where I'm located, summer's hit us here in the last several days, and it's nice to see and feel. So,
yeah, absolutely. We a lot of our kids are out of school. Like the middle of the week was the end of school, but it's been a little coolish and rainy, so it's kind of summer, but it doesn't feel like summer around here. But I'm sure we'll get there soon enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, as we have talked about the last several weeks, the floodgate should be opening here in the next several weeks concerning recruiting. So I'm sure we will have much to talk about, much more than the typical June and July swoon for college football. Yeah. Again, for everybody, the dead period's over on June 1st. Tons of visitations lined up for the next several weekends after that, and we will be all over it here. Today, we're going to run through our Big 12 quarterbacks rankings, and we're going to select a position per week and run through the Big 12 and get you set for August camp here. And let's start at the position that's the most important. And we start with Jason's rankings of the Big 12 quarterbacks, 10 all the way up to number 1. So, Jason, before we dive into your specifics here, just curious, because different people approach this differently. I'll let you know how I approach it. I'm not trying to make a statistics prediction, meaning if I believe somebody's the third best quarterback in the league, but they've got weapons all over the place and the best offensive line, and they produce the best season, I'm not going to predict them, or I'm not going to rank them number 1. Right. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. That's just how I do it. I defend the guy that I think is number 1, even if he doesn't have the best stats. I still defend, okay, well, he doesn't have A, B, and C. This other guy's got all these weapons and has an offensive genius on the sideline and all that sort of thing. So I try to look at just the player. A lot of people do the rankings different and say, yeah, I'm taking all of it into account and saying, yeah, this guy's got all these weapons. So with his ability added in, I think he's going to be number 1 or number 2.
Right. Yeah, for me, Mark, it's a little bit of a combination. So I do just exactly what you had mentioned, judge it specifically by the player itself, but then I also kind of take into account, as you mentioned, the weapons that they have. What is, from an offensive coordinator perspective, from offensive line, receivers, running backs, what do they have around them to help? And then also there's a couple of kids here that will be 2 or 3 kids here of the top 10 that will be new starters this year. So, for those are a little bit harder to judge. There's a couple of transfers, and then there's another brand new starter within the program. So on that, you kind of look at, any stats that they had that was meaningful, obviously the past year. And then I also kind of look at, even though they're going to be a new starter in the position, I also kind of look at what they have around them, just for them to put themselves in a position to be successful, for this year. So there's a couple of 2 or 3 categories that I kind of melt into one in terms of kind of putting these projections together.
Remington, we appreciate you being here, and everybody else. We debuted on the Oklahoma channel with our live show last week, and all went well. We've got about 1,300 views on that live stream post and had about 70 online. So definitely a nice debut. So let folks know that we are here each and every Friday at 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central. I got to remember being an Eastern time zone guy, that if the team's in another time zone, hey, that's most important. And so 1:30 Central for you folks in the Midwest. And we're going to run through Jason's quarterback rankings in the Big 12, mine as well. And also want to let you know that you ultimately produce the show. So we will still address your comments and questions as we move along here. So let's start down there at the bottom at number 10.
Yeah, so as I'm sure will be the case as we go through, we have a Kansas individual that's going to be ranked number 10. And so And as we go through these, Mark, I believe there's probably three schools that really have a legitimate quarterback controversy kind of going in. Well, competition, I guess I should say, going into the season, especially right now. So a couple of them, I'll mention who I believe is my projected starter at the position, but we can kind of talk about some of the other guys as well. So at number 10, I have Jason Bean at Kansas. Certainly, he'll battle with the incumbent starter, but Jason Bean, a transfer from North Texas, as you have the stats on there, 1,300 yards overall, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think that the biggest jump that he has to make certainly is from a completion percentage perspective. 56%, really isn't going to get it done. Even at Kansas, he'll need to be a little bit better as far as that goes. But a good dual threat guy. Did decent last year in his first year as a starter for North Texas, took them to a bowl game. So, like I said, I think he'll be an improvement at the position that they have had, over the last few years. But I have either if it's Jason Bean or if it's, I believe Jalen Daniels was the guy that played last year as the starter. So whoever it is, I got earmarked for number 10.
I checked out a number of guys at this position here that may at least have a shot in August camp, and Jalen Daniels being the most substantial guy because he was the starter for most of 2020. He only threw 1 touchdown with 4 interceptions at 50% passing. Miles Kendrick has played considerably better than that in the time that he's had over the last couple of years, with 7 touchdowns and 5 picks at 61%. And then they've got a couple of true freshmen that you would expect would be long shots in Conrad Holly and Ben Easters to gain that starting position at Kansas. So we start out at number 10. Jason's got Jason Bean. Even with a namesake, Jason still can't raise him out of that 10th spot. But number 10, I got Jason Bean there at number 10 as well. He's supposed to be lightning quick, and I really can't think back. I know I've seen North Texas football over the last couple of years, and as you mentioned, they had a longtime starter before him, so he just played the one season in terms of starting last year, and I saw them play a couple times, probably saw the bowl game, but don't recall anything that is outstanding to me, except for they say he's lightning quick. He's a true dual threat guy. He is fast. All right, Jason, we move it up to your number 9 spot in the Big 12.
Yeah, so for number 9, I have Jacob Zeno for Baylor. We also could put Jerry Bohannon in this group as well. Neither guy played a lot, hardly at all last year, even in kind of mop-up duty. I think really both of them, I think, and Mark, you can kind of correct me if you have this data point, I think they had less than about 15 passing attempts combined. So Charlie Brewer, ran the show for the most part. Of course, he's off to Utah. Is that right? I think
yes.
Charlie Brewer's at yeah. So, I think the biggest visual representation that, at least specifically for Oklahoma people watching this channel, is both Jacob Zeno and Jerry Bohannon played against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game a couple of years ago when Charlie Brewer went out with a concussion early on in that game. Really, Bohannon came in. He was the second string guy, was pretty ineffective. Downfield, Oklahoma handled him fairly well. And then Jacob Zeno played in the fourth quarter and really, lit Oklahoma up, in 2 or 3 possessions that he had in that Big 12 championship game. Only a late Trey Brown, tackle for a long pass actually kept Oklahoma in the lead in that game. So for me, what Zeno was able to do in the passing game, and also from a mobility perspective, I would put Zeno a little bit ahead of Bohannon, but certainly not more so to have him any more than number 9 on the list.
Yeah, my evaluation of Zeno went right to that 12 championship game as well, because this has been the case the last couple of years for the Sooners. They've won the Big 12 championship game, but they were tested, and Baylor made quite the run once Charlie Brewer left the game. They were a bit staggered for a while, but Jacob Zeno, as you mentioned, was the 3rd guy to come in because of Bohannon's ineffectiveness, and Zeno came in I the stat sheet on the game won't necessarily wow you because he missed a lot of throws. He was just in over his head to a certain extent, but he made a lot of plays. If I recall, he looked really scattershot right when he got into the game, and then he got his footing, got going, and really made some big plays. So Jacob Zeno, again, coming off that Big 12 championship game, and we had his numbers up there earlier, but still a bit of a quarterback battle there in Waco with Dave Aranda having to make that decision. Bohannon and Zeno. All right, so we move on to the 8th spot.
Yeah, so for number 8, maybe a little bit of surprise for some, but I have Jarrett Dagey from West Virginia coming in at number 8. Really had a solid year in his first full year as a starter last year for West Virginia, almost 2,600 yards passing just last year. 14, but he only had 14 touchdowns through the air, so that's a little bit why I have him, kind of down in the list. Really a good game manager for what West Virginia likes to do on the offensive side of the ball. Certainly, I think he'll probably be asked to do a little bit more in his second full year as a starter for West Virginia. But as you mentioned, his touchdown to interception ratio is really solid when you look at the totality of his career. Obviously, coming from Bowling Green before West Virginia here, 60 touchdowns, 22 interceptions. A bit of a statue back there. He's not a dual threat guy. He's not anybody that's going to beat you with his legs. But he's a guy with as tough as a schedule as West Virginia has early on. He'll have an opportunity to make a name for himself. For West Virginia and overall in the Big 12. He was completing almost 64% of his passes last year, which is very consistent for what he's done in his career. So for me, as we go to this list, 7 of the 8 guys remaining are very fully entrenched at the starter at their prospective school. So I got Dagey here at number 8.
Yeah. So keep in mind, everybody, that I'm posting the career statistics. So Dagey didn't throw 60 touchdowns last year, but he did throw 14, as Jason mentioned, 4 interceptions. Jason had pointed out the not prolific statistics, but good TD to pick ratio. And he was the one guy, Jason, in compiling the career stats as I went through. Once I hit his number of rushing yards, when you said a statue in the backfield, you mean a statue in the backfield. Everybody's getting out of the pocket at some point, picking up positive yardage, but my goodness, Dagey's at negative 400. So that's pretty much basically he's gaining almost nothing with his legs, and then that's a ton of sack yardage there, as that's how that's compiled in college football. Remind everybody out here that we're talking Oklahoma football here every Friday at 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern. Friends that love Big 12 football, Oklahoma, whatever whoever their favorite team is, bring them in here, and we will hit your comments and your questions as we move through. So regardless of what our topic is, we will always be reviewing the live chat. So I've got Jason Bean at 10, Jacob Zeno at 9, just like Jason. Then I'm going with Dagey at 7, a spot up with 33 games played, 30 starts. And again, saw something where Neil Brown was just very glowing in his comments about Dagey's improvement this spring. So West Virginia is an interesting club to keep an eye on, certainly in the Big 12 after what they did on defense last year. All right, Big 12 quarterback rankings, and we're up to number 7.
Yeah, so I have Skylar Thompson at number 7. Really tough season for him last year. Played the first few games and was out for the remainder of the season with an injury. Was playing really well at the time of his injury. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really was kind of getting to the point where he was getting it. Had a really good game against Oklahoma early on in the year, and then obviously was gone for the remainder of the year. And you could see Kansas State went downhill. Their trajectory was downhill when he left. So he'll be back this year for his season. So when I kind of put together some of his statistics, I kind of looked at what he did the previous year, 2019, almost 60% completion percentage. He was, I think, let's see here, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. but he's very much a dual threat guy, as you have here in his career, over 1,000 yards rushing. So he's a guy that can kind of beat you with his legs and his arm. At Kansas State, he's going to be, he's going to be a guy who's not going to wow you with his passing stats, but his ability to do both of those from a dual threat perspective gives him that opportunity to and that's really what, for me, Mark, differentiated me between him and Jarrett Doege, was just his ability to do both from a running perspective as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Kansas State does, after they struggle towards the end of the year. And then certainly coming back this year, they have Stanford to begin the year. So a difficult game starting off for Kansas State. So it'll be, I think I got Thompson here entrenched at number 7.
He seems to be the classic Kansas State quarterback, whether that's going all the way back to one of the more successful quarterbacks in the history of the program, his quarterback's coach right now, Colin Klein, or just what we see with the Jesse Ertzes and Alex Deltons of the world that have been quarterbacks that have battled with Skylar Thompson for the starting job. He's the prototypical Kansas State quarterback. He's probably not going to earn a spot at the next level. He's not a prolific passer, can't make all the throws, but he's a gutty leader, battling back from injury, as Jason alluded to. And yes, he's mobile, and not that he's not fast and speedy, but he will also lay a shoulder into a linebacker or a safety. So he's a tough guy. Coming back from that injury, he should be good to go. Again, as Jason mentioned, in addition, he had 22 rushing touchdowns in his career. Provides that dual threat. So even though we differ by one spot with Doege and Thompson, I certainly get the point, because that's a whole other dimension to the offense that Skylar Thompson brings. All right, Jason and I running down our Big 12 quarterback rankings. All right, we're up to number 6.
At number 6, I got Max Duggan for TCU. He's, again, a very prototypical dual threat guy. Only 57% completion percentage for him, which is something he'll need to obviously improve on. He's a gamer, though. He's a kid who's beat Texas the last couple of years. Does have those 25 touchdown passes, as you have alluded to here on the screen, 16 rushing scores as well. He's a guy that may get pushed a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like. Once fall gets here, but he should still be the guy, I think. But looking at him, he has the ability to maybe take TCU to the next level. I think as we've talked about with TCU, the defense is there. They're very consistently one of the better defenses in the Big 12, but they've not had the offense to go along with it. So Duggan, I believe this will be his 3rd year as a starting quarterback for TCU. Maybe was a partial starter a couple of years ago, but was certainly the full-time starter last year. So having him and that consistency there will help that offense. Got a couple of really good running backs in the program. They're fairly strong at the wide receiver position. So they could be a dark horse in terms of the Big 12 overall if they can get enough good play out of Duggan at that starting quarterback position here at number 6 in our rankings.
I'm right there with you. I've got Duggan at 6. And actually, if you look at his numbers, and I got to admit, not watching a whole lot of TCU, I don't remember watching a whole lot last year. I'd watch a quarter here and a quarter there. He actually threw the ball a whole lot more the previous season. Obviously, they played a full season plus a bowl game. And he improved from 53% completion percentage 2 years ago to 61, 15 to 10 on the TD to pick ratio 2 years ago to 10 to 4. So his quarterback rating went up some 21 points last year. So he might be headed in the right direction. And as we've discussed, I think we agree on this, that one of the main reasons why TCU isn't quite the team that they were 5 years ago, let's say, is Gary Patterson could use a quarterback who's going to be playing in the top half of the league and not really, being pulled by the running game and the defense. And so they need Duggan to continue to improve for TCU to be a wild card in the Big 12 hunt this year. Would remind everybody you can leave your quarterback ratings, and we'll read those off in the comment section as well as we run through it right here. So we're up to number 5.
So at number 5, really, tough to evaluate this kid. So I've got Casey Thompson at number 5, and Mark, as we alluded to at the top, part of the new, it's either going to be it's going to be a brand new starter at Texas, whether it's Casey Thompson or Hudson Card. I'm gonna go with Thompson, just kind of the way he played towards the end of the year, certainly in that bowl game against Missouri in the second half. And then, the way he played in the spring game, thought he was a little bit better than Hudson Card in that game. So from my perspective, we'll go with Casey Thompson. Really, in a spot where they wanted to get him some playing time, obviously last year in that bowl game, in a game that, that mattered, right? In terms of, they were still in the game. It's not like it was mop-up duty or, they were well ahead at that point. And, honestly, Mark, one of the most impressive debuts, so to speak, in a half a play, on how he played against Missouri in that second half of that bowl game was really impressive. So, given the fact that he's coming off of that, he's got a great running back in Bijan Robinson behind him. He's got some good wide receivers coming back. Bringing Sarkisian into the fold will do nothing but improve his play. So, I know sometimes it might be difficult to look at a guy in the top 5 who hasn't played more than a half of significant football for Texas, but I think he'll be good enough. He'll put up good enough numbers to have him at the very least in the top 5 when we look at this, kind of going back at the end of the season.
That's another aspect of this that is somewhat intriguing in regards to just different people's approaches to rankings, and especially with college football. We're not talking about the NFL where quarterbacks are around for 15 years, and so you get pretty much the same set of athletes to discuss. There's a lot of influx of new players that have 4 and 5 stars next to their name, and maybe you saw them for 20 pass attempts possibly, and so what do you do with them? And I kind of cut that right down the middle as well in regards to, Casey Thompson may turn out to rival the top 2 quarterbacks in the league. He's got that kind of talent, but we just haven't seen it. So I pretty much split the difference as well. I put him at number 5, although I went full throttle in another league in the SEC and took a quarterback who's not played a meaningful game, meaningful pass, and rated him number 1. As I did with Tua Tagovailoa a few years ago.
Yeah.
I just ranked him number 1 based on what I knew he could do. So yeah, with Casey Thompson, I tell you, yeah, that bowl game against Colorado, he came into the game and I thought, yeah, I've heard about this guy, that he's supposed to be the next guy. And man, he threw one ball that I still remember. He dodged about 3 guys in the backfield, not like running around, but just pocket presence, dodged a few guys, and then threw a laser through a tight window, like off platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then he threw a couple other lasers for a touchdown. I remember on a slant that I was like, oh yeah, this guy's got talent.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to have to learn the offense and show that he can command the offense and lead the team. That's a whole other deal. But the signs are good right now for him with 3 games under his belt and let's see, 7 total touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Skylar Thompson. Never mind. I'm looking at yeah. So anyway, he looked impressive in the bowl game. Definitely 6 touchdowns, no picks so far in the time that he's had. So we are set on Casey Thompson at number 5 and Hudson Card. I got to say this as well, Jason. I threw out some comment about Casey Thompson either on Twitter, or I made a comment during a particular show, and I had some people jumping down my throat thinking that I was insane to think that he was going to win the starting job. But I thought he was in the lead. So we shall see.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll certainly be a competition into the fall and up until that first game against Louisiana. But yeah, at this point, I haven't really seen anything in watching their spring game that would lead me to believe that Card is better than him or is in a better position than him at this point. All
right, Jason, and my quarterback rankings in the Big 12, we're up to number 4.
Number 4, I have Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. Really, when I was looking at this, Mark, one of the oddest things I've really ever seen from a statistical perspective, Spencer Sanders had the same exact number of completions and number of attempts in 2019 as he did in 2020. I looked at a couple of different statistical sites that had that and made sure that was actually accurate, and I think it is. So very, very interesting from a consistency perspective. I think, a really good dual threat quarterback. Really wasn't quite as much of a dual threat this past year. Had the injury early on against Tulsa, which I think kind of limited him doing that, or maybe the coach is like making some calls, trying to not get him out of the pocket as much. So, I think the knock on Sanders, which has been over the last couple of years, is he does have a propensity to turn the ball over. Whether that's an interception or a fumble. Cut down on the interceptions a little bit, but as you have here on the career, 30 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, not a good touchdown to interception ratio. When you think of a team and you think of a kid who wants to, certainly Oklahoma State wants to be in that conversation for the Big 12 championship every single year, and they were for quite a bit of the season last year, but kind of faltered a little bit there towards the end with the loss to Oklahoma and TCU. But is a guy that can be good enough to be a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league. Probably top 3, I would say, is maybe his ceiling, given who's in front of him. But yeah, a guy out of Oklahoma State who, will be his 3rd year as a starting quarterback for the Cowboys, and has an opportunity to put together a really good season for them and see exactly how good he is, losing some of his weapons at the wide receiver position this year.
I love statistical anomalies, and you pointed one out, and I checked it out here. 155 for 247. The last 2 years, both years, 62.8%. That I would be willing to wager that's never happened in the history of college football. So yeah, 16 to 11, as you mentioned, in the TD to pick ratio 2 years ago, and 14 to 8. That needs to improve. He's been an inconsistent player. He's a very athletic player, highly recruited. He had a nice bowl game against Miami, and I saw something online where he made it a goal this year to be finish as one of the top 10 rated quarterbacks in the nation. So that is good to have goals. So Spencer Sanders and Oklahoma State will shoot for that. Mike Gundy has certainly shown himself capable of pulling that off as an offensive coach. All right. We are up to number 3 for you, and I will tell you that I got Spencer Sanders at 3.
Okay. So for number 3, I have Tyler Shuck from by way of Oregon to Texas Tech this year. Was really one of the most interesting transfers for him to go from the choice from Oregon to Texas Tech, and of course Alan Bowman had moved on as the starting quarterback for most of the year last year from Texas Tech to Michigan. So having him as a guy who's really a young kid from Shuck, who just was a first year starter for Oregon this past year. Played sparingly towards the end of the year. Kind of moved aside for Anthony Brown. Played a little bit more towards the end of the season, specifically in the bowl game. So a guy, he's got the measurables, he's got the talent. In his first year, put up pretty decent stats. Maybe not necessarily what Oregon would expect out of their starting quarterback, but nearly 65% completion percentage, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's not a great dual threat, but he is a guy that does have some mobility out of that position and can make defenses honest. Maybe this is not quite the same offense that that most people are used to coming from Texas Tech, with Matt Wells kind of running the show there and wanting to be in a position to to be a little bit more balanced and be a little bit tougher and play better defense. So, but still, for Shuck, for me, it was really kind of between him and Sanders that I kind of jockeyed between those two positions at number 3 and number 4. But Shuck kind of on his upside, I feel like he had maybe a little bit more upside than Sanders does from a quarterback position. So I've got Shuck coming in at number 3.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I almost went that direction as well, thinking, okay, Sanders is this, Shuck is this. And but Shucks hasn't had anywhere close to the starting experience of Sanders, so maybe he'll fulfill this 4-star potential. I would love to know why he left Oregon. I can't even get this out of my Oregon folks. Why he left Oregon? I saw the Fiesta Bowl. They lost that game. He was in and out of that game. Didn't play well. Oregon went to Mario Cristobal. Went to Anthony Brown to finish out. And but Shucks, the big 4-star, and it was stated after the game that everyone felt as though he was coming back, and of course, Oregon's at a pretty high status in college football, tremendous team around him, and he makes his way to Texas Tech. So Matt Wells and company have had a couple rough seasons, so we'll see if they've got their quarterback of the future. Again, he's got all sorts of ability and had a decent season for Oregon his first time out. So Shuck at number 3 for Jason. I've got Shuck at number 4, but certainly understand the Spencer Sanders has been around for 2 years and doesn't seem to be getting too much better. Not that he's not a decent quarterback, but Shuck takes care of the football a little bit better.
Yeah.
All right, we move it on to your number 2 quarterback.
So for number 2, I have Brock Purdy from Iowa State. Really does a very good job at getting the ball out of his hands into his playmakers in playmakers' hands. 66% completion percentage is very good. Obviously, the career 62 touchdowns, 25 interceptions is very solid. The last year he struggled a little bit in protecting the ball, a little bit more than maybe he did previous years in his career, maybe trying to do a little bit too much. Had 19 touchdowns and 9 interceptions last year. But he's a good dual threat guy, as you have here on the board, almost 1,000 yards rushing in his career, 18 touchdowns on the ground. Has a lot of weapons, Xavier Hutchinson, Charlie Kolar, obviously Breece Hall from a running back perspective as well. Has 2 top 20 in college football offensive linemen, really, in my opinion. That'll pave the way for him. So I think as we've talked about a lot about Iowa State, and we've talked about Purdy, I think it's going to be a different situation for obviously Iowa State, but Purdy as well, coming into the season as a guy and as a team that has a lot of expectations on their, kind of inside of that program. I think when we did our rankings last week, we both have Iowa State firmly entrenched as a top 10 college football team coming into 2021. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that expectation. But I think, to me, Purdy is the clear number 2 overall in the Big 12.
Brock Purdy was only the 37th rated dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, so he fits the Iowa State Matt Campbell narrative of, and to consider there's a pro style category of quarterbacks and a dual threat. So he wasn't rated the 37th best quarterback in the country. He was rated probably around 70th or 75th.
Right.
And it's not like a complete long shot never happens where a 35th rated quarterback becomes a big time starting quarterback, but it's pretty rare. Most of your starting quarterbacks, if you go year to year through the recruiting rankings, are in that top 10 to 15 to 20 range, and then it really thins out after that. So Brock Purdy, again, I don't know if Iowa State just develops better than anybody else, or they just got an eye for talent better than anybody else. I'm sure it's some kind of combination of both, but Brock Purdy and that Iowa State football team ready to make a run this year. Everybody's excited to see it. So He could work on of course, the TD to pick ratio would help them late in ball games. All right, let's see if everybody's keeping score. I think there's not a whole lot of suspense for number 1. I don't know that there was anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at Spencer Rattler here at number 1, as we have him, he's a guy that I don't think, certainly there probably wouldn't be a lot of suspense coming into this. Number 1 overall in the Big 12, you could certainly make a good case. No, number 1 overall nationally. He's getting a lot of whatever you think of, if you're thinking of Heisman, he's got, him and Sam Howell are kind of number one, number two. When you think of, who might be the number one draft pick coming into the 2022 draft, it could be him and Howell, or depends on who you talk to. Maybe number one, number two, at least in the top five, certainly there. So, and it's interesting, Mark, a kid that was, that caught some flack a little bit this past year, for a freshman coming in and throwing 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a guy that was replaced in the first half of their biggest game of the year. It shows what the bar has been set at Oklahoma from a quarterback perspective. But I think he would probably tell you this, and certainly Lincoln Riley will tell you this, that him being benched in that first half against Texas and coming back in the second half was certainly a trajectory change for him in not only his career but his season last year. When you look at the completion percentage, it's right where you would like it to be. Anywhere from that 65 to 70% range is incredible. There's very few kids that can even get to the 70% range, this day and age. But over 3,000 yards passing this past year. We mentioned kind of the 29 touchdowns and the 7 interceptions, and he had the very much like a Purdy, very much like a Shuck, who's a guy who's not going to wow you with his dual threat skills, but he is elusive and quick enough, to get out of some traffic there in the pocket and be in a position to make people think from a running perspective. Had a rushing touchdown against Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. Had 6 rushing touchdowns on the ground through the year for Oklahoma. So kind of nitpicking him a little bit. We've talked a little bit about him, cutting out the turnovers. He did that at a greater degree towards the end of the season last year for Oklahoma. His movement in the pocket and his quick decision making is, it's a couple of maturation areas that we'll look for as Oklahoma starts the season. But yeah, for me, I mean, whether you're talking in the Big 12 or nationally, Rattler is right there, and then certainly number one here in our Big 12 quarterback rankings.
All right, Jason and I pretty much in sync across the board with the Big 12 quarterback rankings. Only a few guys that were off by one spot. I was right there with Rattler 1, Purdy 2 as well. We talk Oklahoma football here every Friday, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central with you. Please leave your comments and your questions in the live chat, and we will get to those and let people know that we're here. If you enjoy the conversation, others will as well. So whether they're Oklahoma fans and maybe just because of my platform where we talk college football with everybody, I think some of these shows are a little bit different than many you'll find. So you're going to hear from all sorts of different college football fans and different fan bases that join the chat as well. So the one thing I'm going to throw out there, Jason, is that with nobody asking any questions right now, is that some of the early lines came out in college football, and I've done a bit of a scan here, and it's not like a week-to-week thing. I think they're selected big games that have come out as an early line, which gets a lot of people's juices flowing because that's what the interest is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'm running through them. The first 2 I've tracked down would be number 1, the Nebraska game in week 3. Have you looked it up first?
I believe I saw the Texas one. I did not see the Nebraska one.
Do you want to take a guess on this one?
I would venture it's in the 4 touchdown neighborhood. I would say 24 to 28.
I would too. 18.
Wow. Yeah, that is very surprising. For me, I think maybe there's a general thought that Nebraska will be much better this year. I mean, you would certainly think so, obviously, right? With this being is this Scott Frost's 4th year or 5th? 4th, I think.
4th year.
Yep. As the head coach. They don't have a terribly tough schedule before Oklahoma. I believe they open up with Illinois, and then they play Fordham in the second week of the year, and then Oklahoma there. So they'll, I mean, barring, I know they lost to Illinois last year, but I think it's a team. Obviously, it's a game they have to win, to going into that game against Oklahoma. So, but then obviously they should have little problem with Fordham to come into that game 2-0. So, yeah, I think it's something that's interesting. I mean, it will be interesting once we get to week 3 to see what that line actually looks like. But like you, I was very surprised to see it to hear you say it just now at only 18.
All right, talking Oklahoma here on our Sooners channel. So please check us out every day with content and our live show every Friday. This is only the second time we've done this, so we're just getting revved up. So please join us each and every Friday at 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central. So I'm looking at the line on Oklahoma, Texas, 1.5.
Is that right?
Whoa. Hang on. So I'm seeing two. I'm not understanding. I see 1.5, and then I'm sorry. I need the context in 11.5. I missed a 1 there. I was going to jump all over that for a conversation. Okay, I can see that.
Which is still interesting to me when you look at that game in a neutral site being 11.5, and then you look at Oklahoma hosting Nebraska. So you take from a comparative perspective, the odds makers think that maybe Texas is only about when you account the home field advantage for Oklahoma against Nebraska, when you think about that, you think maybe that the odds makers think that Texas is only about a 4 or 5 point better team than Texas right now. So, I mean, it's obviously at this point in the year, it's for guys like me and you to kind of discuss and think about and wonder kind of what's in the thought process there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's very interesting to think about because Texas is a team that a lot of people don't really know what to think about. In terms of kind of the predictions and prognostications. And I think a lot of people think obviously that they've got a lot of talent there. They're going to be good. I believe a 7 or 8 win team a year ago, and then and then you bring in Sarkisian and the talent that they got there. They certainly will be there. But Nebraska has a much easier schedule leading up to Oklahoma than Texas does. And I know it's a little bit further down in the schedule, but Texas they go to Arkansas and then they host Louisiana the opening game of the year, and then they do go to TCU before that game. So Texas will be a little bit more battle tested, I think, than Oklahoma will coming into that game. When you see with those 3 teams, and Oklahoma really has they have Nebraska and they have Tulane, and I think they'll play West Virginia and Kansas State before that game happens as well. So. But yeah, it's interesting. It always seems like early on the Oklahoma Texas line is a little bit larger than what we would think of that it would be, but then it tends to go down a little bit once you get to game week.
The Sooners are a 21-point favorite at Baylor.
Yeah, I mean that's also kind of interesting. Oklahoma has historically, the last few years not played particularly well there. Of course, in 2017, they were an underdog and they went in to win that game against Baylor and really kind of take back control of the Big 12 in itself. But a couple years ago, didn't play very well in Waco. They were down a little bit. I mean, they were down huge in that game, 31-28 to 3, and then certainly came back and won. And then, a couple years before that, kind of struggled. And then certainly last year at home, they struggled against Baylor as well. So, I think you're going to see based on, early on in the season, based on what the basically what the hype and the trajectory of some of these schools are. Baylor only winning a couple of games last year, maybe not have the same the same hype coming into the 2021 season that Oklahoma has. So not all that surprising to see, Oklahoma has a 3 touchdown pick there.
And then what most people expect to be the game of the year in the Big 12, Oklahoma is an 8-point favorite against Iowa State.
Yeah, that one was in Mark. I saw that one as well. I couldn't remember. I remember it was being around the 7 to 8 point mark. That one's so hard to think about because it's next to the last game of the year. So we're looking in fairly late November. So many things can happen. And obviously I know that when they put these out, they assume that they put them out as if the game was going to happen probably the first game of the year. So when you look at that, Iowa State has an opportunity to they have Iowa early on. They do play. I believe they play Texas they host Texas before that, so they have an opportunity to win a set amount of games, and I would expect them to come in there with no more than maybe 1 or 2 losses at the most at that point in the year. So yeah, it's going to be a big, huge game in Norman this year for both of those teams.
Jason and I have gotten together on a regular basis for a long, long time, and then more specifically every Friday for the last several months, and we decided to go live and bring it here to the Oklahoma channel and interact with all of you. You can catch Jason's work at Last Word on College Football. That's Last Word on College Football with Jason Ray and the rest of the crew right there. And Jason and I did position rankings starting with the quarterbacks. This week, we'll go through the rest of the Big 12. We have broken down, of course, position by position across the Oklahoma offense, defense, and special teams. And we'll give that another look as we get into August camp. So we give you all sorts of different kind of breakdowns, and Jason does as well at Last Word on College Football. But you know what the deal is, Jason. Some people they just want to go right to the jugular, right to the point. Don't tell me about the safeties or the how the guard position looks. Bam! Is Oklahoma going to win a playoff game?
Oh my gosh, Mark! It's the it's the it's the elephant in the room. It's the however many pound elephant you want to even call it this year. So we've talked about this several times, and so for me, from a playoff perspective, I think it's so. First, let me kind of talk about just the expectations. I think overall within the program, within the fan base, within just kind of at least locally in the media, it's going to be really important for Oklahoma to win a playoff game this year. So we'll kind of start with that. So whether you're looking at from a recruiting perspective, whether you're looking at this from just from a national perspective on what the worth is of this Oklahoma Sooner program right now, are they a team that can get over the hump? Possibly play for a national championship this year, or are they a team that still is not quite there to be able to beat some of the bigger teams? And then you also have to take into consideration. Of course, we don't know this. We're thinking about we're just starting summer when this is we're getting close to the winter season. We're talking about these, but I think it's a big part of it's going to be a matchup. Who Oklahoma gets matched up with, and what that looks like when you go into a playoff situation. What does because there's so many intangibles that we don't know about right now. We don't know about injuries. We won't know about suspensions. Like there's so many things that can happen this year. But right now on what is today, May 20th, May 21st, I think Oklahoma does, at the very least, I think they will win a playoff game this year. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions about a national championship. I think they have the talent on both sides of the ball. Nothing through spring and thus far through the summer has led me to believe that they won't be in a position defensively to do what they need to do. I think there's some things that it hinges on, right? I mean, I think it was kind of interesting. I don't know how much you saw this, but Paul Feinbaum came out and said, who's historically an SEC sunshine pumper, obviously. And, he's been, kind of a little bit at the ire of Oklahoma and Big 12 fans. He came out and said that he thinks Oklahoma's the best team in the country. They don't have they really don't have any weaknesses, which I think a lot of people kind of took kind of had an eyebrow raise reaction to that, because number one, Feinbaum is not the type of guy that has ever been a glowing endorsement for the Oklahoma football program. And I think too, you take some of these things that these folks say right now with a grain of salt, but I think there's a couple of things. So I'll say for Jimmy for the question, I think there's two or three things that kind of hinge on whether or not they'll be able to win a playoff game. For me, offensive line, specifically center. How do they play, and how does that position mature throughout the year? They're obviously, I don't think they're going to be great early on at center. However, now once the season kind of gets started, specifically towards the end of the season, they should be a little bit more consistent at that position. And how does that fall in line? I think perfect scenario for Bill Beanbo and Lincoln Riley. They have Andrew Rame entrenched in that position. I think entrenched in that position where if Andrew Rame isn't the guy who wins that position at center, how do the other pieces fall into place? So that's the number one, I think, kind of really question mark. And I'm not going to say a weakness. I don't really think Oklahoma has any what I would call a glaring weakness. I would say maybe really more of a question. Secondarily, I would say the secondary. I think Oklahoma improved a lot last year towards the end of the year. However, they still were ranked in, I think, around 80th overall in total. And when you look at against the pass, so they've got to improve there. They've got some improved guys that looked really good in the spring that I think give them a little bit more depth. They've got some new kids. Latrell McCutcheon is a guy that could play some. Billy Bowman could play some at the nickelback. You've got DJ Graham, who's still a younger kid. So they've got a lot of good talent, but they're young at that position. And then the wide receiver spot, I think for me is and it's interesting when you think about the wide receiver spot on paper. This could be the best wide receiving core that Oklahoma has ever had. You got Theo Weiss, you got Jaden Hazelwood. Obviously, Trajan Bridges is no longer with the team, so he's not a guy that you think about. You've got Austin Stogner from a tight end perspective, and then and you've got Drake Stoops, and then they bring in Mike Woods from Arkansas, a guy that has put a lot of has played a lot, and then of course you got Marvin Mims as one of the best freshmen of the year. New kid and Mario Williams. So they've got 5 or 6 guys there. If they can get really good production out of 2 or 3, if 2 or 3 guys ended up being, kind of the guy and make that rotation, I think that's an opportunity for them, for Oklahoma to take that extra step. So those are the three question mark areas, I think. But having said that, I do think this is the year where Oklahoma will get over the hump, so to speak, and win that first playoff game.
There's got to be about a 90% certainty that they're going to play one of 4 teams.
Right.
They're going to play Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, or Georgia.
Yep.
Most likely.
Yeah, I mean, and that's there may be a team that doesn't, that to your point, that sneaks into that top 4, but as we did our rankings last week, as I kind of scoured the internet, kind of looking at a lot of the even pre-spring and post-spring, there's not a single ranking that I've seen by anyone that has anyone other than those 5 teams in that top 5, with, as you mentioned, with Oklahoma and Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia. So and they all have. I think what's interesting about this year, Mark, is interested to hear your kind of thoughts. Is for the first time in quite a while, I don't think that we have a team that is really the odds-on favorite. You can make a solid case for any of the 5 teams, to win the national championship. When you look at Alabama, they've got a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. A couple of offensive linemen to recover from losing. They have a new quarterback, new running back, new wide receiving core. when you talk about Clemson. Maybe not as talented as a Clemson team as we've seen in the past, but they're going to be really strong on defense. Have a fairly new starting quarterback. Really the same with Ohio State. Maybe more of a question mark in the defensive secondary, and then obviously the quarterback position, and then you have Georgia who looks to be stacked. And I can't disagree with you. Maybe the most talented team in the country, all things considered, but whether they lost a lot in the secondary as well, what do they look like? So, and then we mentioned Oklahoma. So yeah, for me, I think, it's one of those things. Do you take those four, or do you take the field? Would be an interesting prop bet, as we kind of talked about some of the betting lines earlier. I would, if you had a gun to my head, I could not take any team other than those top five at this point.
Well, I definitely take those 5 against the field. If I only get the 4 minus Oklahoma against the field, I still take the 4, because I just think the percentages are just, not that Oklahoma is not capable of doing it, but just the percentages are just so overwhelming based on what we've seen. I went through, and I'm going to post a video soon where I've gone through the AP poll to see how accurate it is in projecting toward the playoff teams, the national champion, the national championship game participants, and then taking the reverse to see, okay, in the national game participants, where were they ranked? Well, yeah, it's become so much more predictable during this playoff era, where Clemson, Alabama were like 2-1, 1-2, 1-2. They, for a few years there, last year, Alabama was 1, Ohio State was 2 preseason.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark. It's funny, that is really, and this isn't probably another topic for another day, but it's the main driving force for the college football playoff expansion, right? It's the same teams almost every single year: Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson. There's been Notre Dame's got in there a couple of times. Oregon's been there, Florida State has been there, but by and large, you have those same teams. So, I think obviously it's interesting for this discussion that we think it's obviously still going to be the same teams in the playoffs, and certainly to your point, Mark, as it relates to the AP poll, but then just generically as the fuel to the fire of the college football playoff expansion. That's where that's heading, and I think we all think it's inevitable. It's just kind of depending on what the format is going to be and when that happens.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know we discussed them just a few weeks ago. To me, it's a great accomplishment, and certainly difficult to make the playoff, but to win a game in the playoff, or certainly to win a national, you're talking about a whole other level.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's this tier of maybe 8 to 10 teams, and then we narrow it down to like the 5 teams for the last several years. But then to get into that playoff and win it is a whole other level, because we have seen the likes of Michigan State and Oregon and Washington get in there, and Oklahoma several occasions play the one really good game against Georgia, but otherwise show that they weren't quite up to the challenge.
Yeah.
And those 3 schools that we've discussed, so minus Georgia, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think I presented those to you a few weeks ago. They're just overwhelming. They basically just beat each other.
Yeah,
is what's happened. So when Paul Feinbaum comes out with that kind of comment, the thing I find interesting is people have all sorts of motivations in the media to make statements, and he may truly believe that, and I think that's great. I've always approached my platform as I will give some commentary and some opinions and some predictions where people will just say, okay, sure, that's pretty boring. That's what everybody else thinks. But if that's what I truly believe, then that's what I truly believe. I think Spencer Rattler is the best quarterback in the Big 12. I'm not going to say that Skylar Thompson's the best quarterback in the Big 12 just to cause a stir and get people riled up and arguing with me.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not going to shy away from an opinion that I have that may be controversial or be a contrarian opinion. I just give it authentic. Well, not everybody's like that. Some people are looking for an angle to cause a stir. And I'm not saying he's doing that. I would be interested to hear him name as many Oklahoma players as he can.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you.
D-Rock Irish, I believe we've got an answer for you, who's asking about the transfer portal. So this is a two-part question. Number one, asking if there's some type of deadline. So I'm looking right at it just to verify it because I answered this question for somebody recently. Yes, a player has to enter the transfer portal by July 1st to be eligible. And there are still various transfer rule protocols within conferences in regards to that. That's being changed. The Mountain West changed recently. The SEC is going to be taking a vote soon whether to make that. That's kind of a per school situation right now, working with the SEC on individual cases, but they may make it just flat out okay, acceptable and approved across the board. So that's part of it. So yeah, D-Rock Irish, it's July 1st for anybody to be eligible to step on the field for the 2021 season. Now, Jason, will set you up with any rumblings you're hearing out there concerning Oklahoma's quest in the transfer portal.
You know, I really haven't. Before it's all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma goes and looks at maybe a fullback / H-back position area, because Oklahoma's pretty thin at that position with Mikey Henderson moving over to the running back position, and really only having Jeremiah Hall in that spot. And they have Braden Willis that they can kind of put there if they need to, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them go there from a transfer perspective. And as and as most of us know, our viewers here know that Oklahoma was extremely active in the transfer portal. Lately Mike Woods, then Eric Gray, then Wanye Morris, and Robert Conjul, and then they had Micah Bowens from a quarterback position perspective. So they've been extremely active. I think if I was to look, I would think they're possibly the running back position. I mean, with Seth McGowan being gone, they have, they only have 4 guys, and they have a guy that's a converted H-back, over there. I could see them, potentially looking there for some depth. I mean, other than that, I think they're fairly strong at all positions. Maybe a tight end. Again, they're a little bit. They have Austin Stogner, who's coming off injury. Braden Willis is there as well. So they only really have 2 tight ends. So could see that. I honestly don't really see them, and this is kind of a testament to how well they've recruited from a depth perspective. I don't really see them making any moves on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're fairly strong. Should something happen in the summer here in June on injuries, and if Oklahoma has maybe a couple of kids here and there that elect to move on, from a transfer perspective themselves, then obviously they might be active there. But I would be a little surprised if they didn't make a move at the H-back position. But other than that, I think they're probably pretty set with where they're at right now.
Yeah, they've done pretty well. They've done pretty well, especially by way of the University of Tennessee. Got John Sarian on the line, who's asking. I think this is a really good question. Very good. I've gotten the jump on you on this one in looking at the schedule. Which game will be the real test, in your opinion, for whether the pass defense is good enough to get Oklahoma to the playoffs and win the big one?
So, very, very good question. So, thanks, John, for sending that in. I think it's a different answer for if I'm answering to the playoffs and actually win one, right? So, when you look at that, look at that question from a pass defense perspective, I mean, I think initially I'm going to say Texas. Really
that's where
because
I'm going.
Texas, because of what Sark brings to that team, for the weapons that they have at the receiver position. Iowa State is probably a better team overall, but really when you're talking from a pass defense perspective, I think Texas is the team that you're going to look at and see how well they play. Obviously Oklahoma played better in that game this past year and won, and I say better comparatively to how they played against Kansas State and Iowa State, but they still gave up a lot of points. They gave, obviously it went to, that was an extra overtime affair, and that played into it a little bit. But Oklahoma played extremely well in that game for 3 quarters defensively, and they kind of fell apart a little bit in the fourth quarter and let Ellinger and the Texas team come back a little bit. So if I had to point to any one team, one game, it would be Texas. Now, kind of depends on how that game goes, right? So if you're an Oklahoma fan and you're looking at that game and Oklahoma wins that game, let's say 31-14. Let's just say, just for argument perspective, they gave up 14 points and to a team like Texas. I think that gives you an indication. Yeah, Oklahoma's probably ready. They're in a good position. They've put themselves in a good position to get to the playoffs and win that playoff game. Now, if you come out of that game and they won the game 45-42. I mean, you're still maybe on the fence. Like, they can still get there, but they've got some improvements that they need to make. Kind of going into the latter half of that year. And I think, when you think of the pass defense, to me, John, I think one of the things that I look at is how good is your defensive line, because your defensive line has the ability to maybe mask some of the challenges that you have from a secondary perspective. I'm not saying that Oklahoma will or currently does have any challenges, but as good as their defensive line has been this past year and is going to be, from a expectation perspective, they can mask some of those issues. So is Oklahoma able to consistently get pressure, even with the front four without having to do much blitzing? I think that helps the secondary obviously a lot. But when you get into the playoffs, you go against teams that are going to have really solid offensive lines. As we alluded to, those teams that Oklahoma is going to play, they're going to have better offensive lines. So Oklahoma may not be able to always generate that same amount of pressure. So the secondary improvement will be paramount. And Mark, as I'm talking through this, I'm trying to think of any team in the Big 12 that would really challenge them from a really kind of a barometric perspective to know, hey, is this a team? I mean, I don't really think that there is outside of Texas. I mean, maybe Oklahoma State to a degree, but other than that, Iowa State has some weapons, but that's not the way they play offense, the way they run offense. They're a zone read. They're a kind of a pound you in the face, running attack type of an offense as well. So I would think Texas and to a certain degree Oklahoma State.
Nebraska in week 3 lost its best player, Wan'Dale Robinson, to Kentucky. He was a tremendous player, caught 50-some passes in a short season last year and was really a jet sweep kind of guy as well, just an elite type athlete that I saw ranking as being one of the 3 or 4 best transfer portal additions to a team this year. So he's gone from Nebraska. They have really good skill position athletes that are unproven on the outside, but Adrian Martinez, he's going to check down. He's not a long ball thrower. He's not a guy that's going to show you the NFL pass to 15 yards, that hash, from the far hash all the way over, just make those kind of throws. He's just not that kind of player. He's going to run around and make plays, and he's gotten to a point in his career. He takes care of the football better than he did. He was really loose with the football early, and he's improved there, and he will be accurate in a very short range. So he's not going to test you downfield. And then looking at everybody else, then the thing about Texas that's going to be intriguing is, of course, they're going to have an elite prospect win that job, whether it's Hudson Card, most likely Casey Thompson, and that is game number 6. So I believe at that point in the deal, either that player is going to be playing well or they're going to move on to the other guy. And so the chances are between two elite prospects that one of them is going to pan out. And then with Joshua Moore and Jake Smith and Brendan Eagles, and I was just looking at Bijan Robinson coming out of the backfield as a true freshman, caught 15 passes and a couple touchdowns. So that's part of the pass defense as well, picking up those backs and receivers, backs as receivers out of the backfield. And so I think Texas is substantially, before Iowa State, the team to look out for in the passing game. But Iowa State with a veteran quarterback, Charlie Kolar's one of the best in the nation at tight end, and Xavier Hutchinson and company, more proven with a higher floor, but just in terms of sheer athleticism, explosion, and potential, I'm going to go with Texas as being a big challenge.
No, yeah, certainly agree. Texas, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State are the three teams that can probably, kind of press them a little bit with their talent. There's some other good teams, obviously, in the Big 12 offensively, but I think those are the three that absolutely are going to push Oklahoma to its extent to really kind of get them ready for a playoff game. So, I agree with you.
All right. Good stuff with everybody here in the live chat. Appreciate everybody being here. We talk Oklahoma football each and every Friday with you, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 there in the Midwest where it's most important. And, of course, we will be here throughout the summer. And, again, aside from scheduling conflicts and vacations and so forth, we will be here every Friday with all of you and breaking down positional rankings as we did with the quarterbacks today. If you joined us late, what you do is you wait for the video to post, which takes about 15 minutes, and you run back and you catch what you missed there as well. Jason, anything else we can run down?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think when you think of recruiting, I know there's a lot of stuff that will come up, and we'll kind of get into this with the Champ U barbecue in mid part of June. Oklahoma really right now has just an incredible list of attendees, both 2022 and 2023 kids that will be in attendance for that barbecue for Oklahoma. And really, historically, over the last few years, certainly they didn't have it last year with the pandemic, but this year probably will be bigger than ever. To your point about the dead period being lifted on the 1st of June, Oklahoma will be in a position to, not only Oklahoma, everybody else will be in a position to host recruits, to go visit, and for recruits to make their unofficial visits, official visits to all teams across the country, and that's looking like a big lineup right now. So once we get a little bit closer to that, we'll talk through that and look and see who all's gonna be there. Maybe any commitments that we might see come out of that session. But other than that, I think Oklahoma's waiting on Malachi Nelson, 2023 kid that's supposed to announce in the middle of July. He is confirmed as a guy that's coming to that barbecue in the middle of June. So things will heat up both on the 2022 and 2023 recruiting circuit, because that's about, to that extent, that's about all that there is right now. I mean, you get obviously there's some news and notes that come out, accordingly throughout, but there's nothing of any extent that I think that, everybody would be interested in seeing right now. I think one thing, you take some of these, a lot of these kids have went home, for at least part of the summer. Now, I think another guy, a kid that Oklahoma fans will be interested in seeing is, Jaden Hazelwood. We've talked a lot about him from in this show. Looked a little slow in the spring game. However, in some of the videos that I've seen he went back to Georgia. He's taken the braces off, so he looks to be a little bit quicker. He looks to be moving a little bit more free flowing for him. So I think a big a big key for him as Oklahoma starts the season is how much he trusts that knee to be able to, to make those cuts and just be a little quicker. Another guy that's really just kind of putting on, getting quicker, putting on the pounds, and really just has just a lot of motivation to be even better is Perrion Winfrey. He's a kid that I've seen a lot of stuff on his social media about him, really just working out, working hard, just doing a lot of things that put him in a position to be even better. He's a kid, Mark, that I think if he plays up to his potential this year, could be a first round pick. I mean, maybe a top 20 pick overall. He's a guy that's maybe not quite as good as a Tommy Harris, not quite as good as a Gerald McCoy, but certainly in that conversation who could work himself up to be a number one draft or a first round draft pick this year. So,
Lewis, thank you so much for breaking the news for us. Michigan has acquired Oregon State defensive tackle Jordan Whitley. And of course, if you are locked in on our Michigan channel, somebody said that might happen about a week ago. So we were on that one as Michigan and everybody else active in the transfer portal. And there might be a mad dash between now being close to the last weekend of May all the way to that July 1st. Who knows? On June 30th, there might be another, 50 guys jump in the way those are coming down. I'm looking at that 247 Sports transfer portal account on Twitter, and every day it's just amazing how many people are in that portal.
I know I'm the same one with you. I even have like notifications on those, and it's hard to keep up with. And interesting. I mean, I think you're exactly right. As we talked about, kind of recruiting, hitting up in the June, July timeframe. I think to your point, there'll be a big from maybe June to July 1st, where we have a lot of movement, and it's really kind of hard. And I'm sure at some point maybe we'll do another top 25 ranking just before the season starts, just to kind of see what that looks like with any transfer portal movement. But yeah, I think it'll be a busy month in the month of June between recruiting and transfer portal guys.
Like to remind everyone that we talk Oklahoma football here every Friday, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central, and we've got live streams, team-specific live streams for Nebraska. That's on our Nebraska channel every Tuesday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. Ohio State's first and foremost Wednesday at 2, and Florida State Wednesday at 6. Then we've got Miami on that team-specific channel Thursday at 5 and at 7. All right, Jason, I think we've done enough damage here. Appreciate you being here as always. And everybody else, again, just we appreciate you being here, but let people know that we are talking Oklahoma and the Big 12 every Friday. So share the link or just let people know that we are here. So we appreciate everybody. Jason, you have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too, Mark. I appreciate it.